What's going on, everybody? This is Jamie from Sharon at Sea. Usually if you see this face on a video, it means we're talking about cruising or travel. But today we're going to switch it up a little bit. Today we're going to talk about building a video editing computer on a budget. Stay tuned. Okay, so here at Sharon at Sea, we love to create content for our YouTube channel. And that involves lots of hours going through video clips that we take when we're on vacation, and editing video, rendering video, and creating the best quality videos that we can. Now for a while, we have been using an old school HP all-in-one computer, and as we started getting into some higher quality equipment and things, we just found that computer was not powerful enough to do what we needed it to do. So we thought long and hard and decided it was time to upgrade our computer system, and we looked around to see what computer system is going to be best for us, and we found that going online, looking at any pre-built systems, we were looking at $1,200, $1,300, $1,400 and more for a computer system that had all the features and components that we were after to be able to make a great video. Well, we decided, let's see if we can't build one ourselves. Heck, a lot of people are doing it out there. Why can't we do it and see what kind of money we can save? So we were able to save a couple $100. All total, everything you're looking at here on the table, we spent about $900 in total. We did a major Amazon run, had everything delivered, and decided, let's put together a video showing us build this computer. Now listen, we're newbies, we're rookies at it. I've never done this before, so you're gonna learn a little bit as I learn. And I'm gonna show you step by step how we're gonna put this system together, and hopefully when it's all said and done, we're gonna hit the power button and this thing's gonna fire right up. Now first, let me go over real quick what you see in front of me here, and just touch base on all the different components that we went out and got, okay? Obviously we got our case, we went ahead and got a motherboard for the system. We have got our processor or our CPU, we have our graphics card, our GPU as well. We got some memory right here, power supply, SSD drive for storage, got our keyboard and mouse set up wireless, got our SATA cables. All the rest of the cables should be inside of this InWin 101 case, a couple of fans to keep things cool, and of course we got a little Wi-Fi dongle just so that we can connect to the internet once we're all said and done. Monitor wise, you can go out and do whatever you want, whether you want a small monitor, big one, 720p, 1080p, or whatever you're into. But today we're just going to focus on the computer. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go step by step, opening things up, show you what's inside, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what it is and what we're hoping it does and why we chose this particular component for this computer build. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so first things first, let's start with the case we decided to get to put all these awesome components into. This is an InWin 101 case. We're familiar with InWin because actually our son has a computer with an InWin, and truth be told, I copied him and got the same case because I liked it so much. Now like I mentioned, we got everything on Amazon, so I won't say each time where we got it, but I will tell you how much we paid. This thing was 70 bucks. So let's bust it open and see why I like this case so much. Alright, so the InWin 101. Here's what I love about it. Take a look right here. It's got full glass on the side. The glass is smoked a little bit, so it's not clear, but it pops out super easy. You just pull these little tabs here, it folds out, and the whole pane comes right out to fully expose your system. Another thing I like about it is it does have the power supply up top. It does have a spot where you can put multiple fans down here too. It's got a little pull-out dust protector deal right there. It's got a spot for two other fans that will get the air out from the side of the case. Take a look at the front. It's got a cool little area that'll light up right here, almost like a hidden power button right here. On top, it's got two connections for USB 3.0 ports, and then it's got your headphone connection. Now also included in the box are going to be all your little screws and everything you need, as well as zip ties for cable management. And one other thing that you'll see a little bit later, it's got a special little bar that you can put in that will support your GPU or your graphics card so that it doesn't put a lot of pressure on the back plate where all your plugins are, and that's pretty cool too. One other thing that's super cool is access to the back side where all your wires are going to be. A couple turns right here, and you have a lot of room, a lot of hidden storage area right here. You have your SSD card holders right here. And all your cables can run back here, so it's going to look great as well as perform great for you. So the InWin 101, that was our choice, and hopefully when it's all said and done, you'll see why we chose it. Alright, so now we got the big old case unboxed. I went ahead and took both sides off, the clear glass side as well as the back side, and put them down over here. Number one, to get them out of the way, and number two, to make sure that I didn't accidentally break anything. Because, you know, we're new here at Sharonatsea when it comes to building computers, and we want to make sure we do it the right way. First things first, let's start by putting the power supply into the computer. For our purpose here, we got the EVGA 500 watt 80 plus certified power supply. Now this is the white certified. I'm not gonna lie, I don't know too much of a difference between the white, the bronze, and things like that. I think it has a lot to do with efficiency and being able to take more power and such. For everything that we're going to do, 500 watts is going to be the perfect power supply. Remember, we're not building a gaming computer. I'm not looking for incredibly fast frame rates, and we're not going to be pushing the processor to the max for hours at a time. So 500 watts will be great for us. Let's unbox this bad boy and put it in, and let's get this thing started. A few other things to note, I do have a couple tools. I got a flathead, I got a Phillips head screwdriver. And if you take a look at the table here, you might be saying, Jamie, that looks a lot like a cardboard box. Well, guess what? It is. This happens to be a new table that we got, and I decided for this purpose of doing the build, I'm going to leave the protective cardboard on. Number one, to protect the table so we don't jack it up. Number two, it's going to be easier to see things on here as we do the build, whether it's screws that fell to the side or anything like that. So it'll be a little easier to work with a cleaner, brighter top on here as opposed to the black tabletop that we have there. Alright, so again, it's an EVGA power supply, 500 watts. I'll tell you what, it gets great reviews on Amazon. The price was right. This thing was just under $45, so you can't beat that for a reliable unit that's going to power up your system. Alright, so we have our power supply out of the box now. I mean, I'll tell you what, at first glance here, there's a lot of wires going on. Now, there's two different types of power supplies out there, modular and just a standard power supply. This one's standard. All the wires are already connected. So I don't have to mess around with plugging in different wires into the unit like you would with the modular one. It's a little nicer for cable management, I guess, if you go with the modular. But for what we're doing, this thing's going to be perfect. Then every one of these wires, for the most part, or cables, is going to serve a purpose for us. The way that this system is set up, again, on the InWin, is the power supply goes on top. So the fan, you want to face down into the case so that it can exhaust air into the case. Once it goes in the case, then it'll be sent out of the case, and it'll get plenty of airflow. So let's go ahead and put this bad boy in there right now. We do have some instructions. We got a couple of screws for connecting it. We do have our power cable, of course, and like I said, I'm a little new to this too, so I will be glancing at the instructions to make sure everything is going in properly. So what's nice is all the holes in the InWin match right up with the power supply. It's pretty standard, and like I said, it's a little bit easier to see these tiny screws on this light tan top as opposed to the black tabletop. Again, that's why I went with the cardboard. And as we start to deal with stuff that has power, you want to make sure that you are not pulling a lot of static electricity into the system. Now, as I sit here, I'm in bare feet. I'm going to make sure that I touch something before I touch anything electrical as we get into the motherboard and the CPU and the graphics card and stuff like that, just because we don't want to get a shock or transmit any electricity or anything like that. So keep that in mind as well. Alright, so now we're just going to screw in these screws here for the power supply. Pretty simple deal. Everything actually lines up really nicely, so we're going to knock this out real quick, and then we will be hooked up and ready to get plugged in. Yeah. Alright, so again, it almost looks weird like it's installed upside down, and I guess it kind of is, but again, you want the fan from the power supply to be blowing into the case. If it's not located in a way where the fan would blow out from the top, then you want to make sure the fan's blowing into the case to clear out all that hot air. Alright, and there you go. Power supply in. What's next? Alright, so next thing we're going to start working on is going to be The motherboard. This is like the brains, it's just a super important part of the computer, and making sure this thing is put in properly will be a key to everything else getting hooked up right. Now, we've gone ahead and secured all our wires in the back of the case, and what's nice about this case is you can use any size motherboard. There's a number of different types that are out there. There's Lucy, please, we're trying to make a video. Sorry, Lucy the dog got excited. So there's a few different sizes: ATX, micro ATX, mini ATX, and that just has to do with how big the motherboard is based on the case that you have. This particular in-win will house any one of those. It's already going to have holes in it so that you can screw in any size motherboard that you get, as long as it's a standard size. So the motherboard that we went with, and remember, we did this on a budget, so we went the Gigabyte brand. Again, it's something I'm familiar with. It's a brand that my son has, so I'm a little familiar with the product and how it works. This is the UD Ultra Durable line. What I like about this one is the price was right. This motherboard is just under $75. I think it was $72.99 if I'm not mistaken. Alright, it's going to handle our processor here, which is going to be the Ryzen 7. We'll talk about that later, but it does have the AM4 chipset, which is what you need. I love this because it has 6 USB 3.0 connections. It will have a couple of them built in, as well as it'll connect to the ones that we have on top of the unit, so that is awesome. It's capable of handling the memory that we want. It's got 4 memory slots on it. And it's got a lot of other basic things that you need from your motherboard. Again, nothing too fancy here. It's not going to light up. It's not going to play songs for you. But it is going to work for what we need it to do. So let's bust this bad boy open and see what we have here. Oh man, that looks nice already. We've got our cable. Underneath here we do have our back plate. An installation CD if we need that, which I don't think we're going to need. And just a little diagram layout and some basic instructions. Now I will tell you, Gigabyte's a great brand, a main brand. You can go to their website if you choose this particular model, or any website or whatever model you choose, and get a lot of detailed information about all the connections, where you plug everything in, and all that kind of stuff. Yes, I've done a little bit of that already, so I kind of have an idea of what we're going to be doing here. So let's get things started. Now the model, again, I mentioned it's a Gigabyte. It's a B450M DS3H, the ultra durable line, and this thing ought to take good care of you. Alright, another thing you may have noticed is, yes, I did don the specs so that I could see exactly what we're doing here before I installed everything backwards and screwed everything up. And let's unveil the motherboard. Now this is something that you feel like you want to be super sensitive with it, but everything that I've read is these things are pretty strong and durable. Now this bag looks pretty neat. It is an anti-static bag. We mentioned that static electricity is something you want to avoid, so we do have that. And when we're talking about touching electrical parts and such, anytime I do that, I want to try to touch something metal first to make sure I don't have any static electricity built up. Even if it's something as simple as my case, just to touch that and make sure I'm not shuffling around you know, on the carpet. I'm not rubbing a balloon on my head or anything like that. I don't think we're going to have any static electricity issues. Now let's take a little bit of a closer look at the motherboard. Alright, so we take a look at the motherboard here. Again, we have our 4 memory expansion slots here. This is where the processor is going to sit nicely. We do have our PCI slots for the graphics card. We have all our other SATA, our SATA 3 plugs that we're going to be using. You can see on the side we have our connections where we have some basic USB ports. We do have an old school plug for your mouse or your keyboard if you go that route. We have an older video cable setup that we will not be using. We do have an HDMI, multiple 3.0 USB ports. We have some 2.0, we have our Ethernet connection, and of course we do have some audio plugs and headphone plugs and things like that. All kind of standard stuff. You've probably seen them 100 times. Now there's a few schools of thought. One is that you put all your things in the motherboard right now and then put it in. But I think what we're going to do is go ahead and put the motherboard in now. Then we'll go ahead and lay in our processor and things like that. So we're going to turn our case over on its side so we can access everything. First thing we're going to do is pop in this back plate. And it just pops right into place and sits right there nicely. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to do is get an idea how this motherboard is going to fit in here. If you notice, in the case, there are a couple of raised little pieces right here. The motherboard will sit on these so that the back of it is not touching the metal. Alright, so these are standard for any size motherboard that you have. Then there's a lot of other holes in here that you will use to support with. The piece comes with little standoffs like this, and these things will screw into place, and that will support your motherboard as it sits a little bit higher than the back right here. So we're going to go ahead and line this up a little bit and see exactly where these things are going to fit. So now we're going to place this in so that this part here lines up with the spaces right here. Alright, and we can see how some of our holes are lining up here as well. So let me go ahead and get one of these bad boys in here. Once again, making sure no static electricity is going to be hitting the board. Alright, once you get one in, the rest of them are easy. That's what they tell me anyway. Alright, so we got all our screws tightened down. The board is secure. You can see there's a little bit of space between the board and the back there with the metal, and that's designed to be that way. And now I think we can consider our motherboard installed. Alright, so our case is unboxed. Our power supply is in. Our motherboard is hooked up and secure. I feel like we're halfway home. I mean, this is fantastic. Alright, so now we have a couple options what you want to do next. I think it's time to deal with the CPU. You know, I don't know, I guess earlier I said the motherboard's like the brains. I guess it's more like the body. And the CPU is really the brain. So let's talk about the CPU a little bit we chose. We went with the AMD Ryzen 7 1700 CPU. Now this is the first generation model, and the thing I like best about this, well, there's a few things I love about this, but one of my favorite things was the price point. Now being this was the first generation, I know the second generations are out now and being bought up all over the place, but you can still find some first generation units. This thing was about $160. The second generation, the equivalent of this, is probably another $100 to $140 more expensive. So it's a sweet, sweet deal. We went with the Ryzen 7 for a few different reasons. This is an 8-core, 16-thread processor. Now, I don't know if you know anything about that, and I didn't know anything about that until I did some research. But basically, the more cores that you have and the more threads that you have, the more the computer is going to be able to do different things at one time. Now, we mentioned in the beginning that this computer is going to be mainly for editing and doing some live streaming and things like this. Well, as far as the editing goes, that multi-core processor, the Ryzen 7, is going to work fantastic for us. We moved out of an HP all-in-one that just had 4-core. We're bouncing up to 8-core and 16 threads. Now we can mess with this and speed it up a little bit. We can overclock the gigahertz and get from 3.0 to 3.7 gigahertz, which has to do with speed, but I'm not that concerned about it. One of the reasons we chose a lot of the parts that we did was because we're not going to be trying to fine-tune anything that we have or overclock it or make it work faster than it's designed to. Now, one thing I also want to mention here is when you look at how these parts go together, there's an amazing website called PC Part Picker where you can put in different components that you're purchasing, and it will know if these things are compatible and if they work together or not. If you put the wrong motherboard and the wrong processor together, it will tell you, do not buy those, they won't go together properly. Same thing with the memory or anything else. So we use that to make sure that everything that we have is going to work together. This is an AM4 chipset with the Ryzen 7 here, and this thing's going to work fantastic. So let's go ahead and open it up and see what we have inside. One thing that's nice is it does have the fancy security tape here, so you know if it's been opened already. This unit has not been, so that's cool. So inside of here are two things. I bet right here is the processor. And also these AMD units come with a fan as well, thus the big box. I don't think there's much more in here, so I'm going to file this box off to the side here. But let's take a look at this. AMD Ryzen series processors come with some neat things, including some fans that'll work well with it. Now, this is not the best cooling fan or cooling system on the market, mind you, but again, for what we're going to be using it for, this thing is going to be fantastic. Alright, so this Ryzen 7 processor comes with the Wraith Spire LED cooler, which is pretty cool. It also already has thermal paste on the back of it, which will come in very handy for us. And of course you have your processor here as well. It comes with a very cool sticker, so you definitely like to have that and put that on your case. So there you go, the processor's unboxed, and next we're going to put this bad boy right into that motherboard. Alright, so we're getting ready to put the processor in, and then when we do that, we'll probably go ahead and put the fan in as well. Now, one thing that I want to make sure that I mention is when you are putting the fan on top of the processor once it's on the motherboard, one thing that you're going to want to use is something called thermal paste or thermal compound. The idea is that the fan will sit and rest on top of the processor. The fan will generate airflow, which will flow throughout the fan parts and then end up going down here to the copper piece that's touching the processor and cooling the processor. The thermal compound is going to go between the processor and the fan to make a nice connection and minimize any air bubbles or anything like that. Now, the fan itself comes with thermal paste already on there, but I gotta be honest, when I opened up the box, the thermal paste looked a little rough. I just didn't like how it looked. So I'm gonna go ahead and use a third-party thermal paste. You can get it at any store, Best Buy or whatever the case is. In this case, I'm using a brand called Thermal Take. TG7. It gets great reviews. The thing's about $6-7 at Best Buy. And I'm going to go ahead and wipe off the thermal paste that came on the fan and replace it with an upgraded new version. And now I'm just going to use a little widget here very carefully. I don't want to mess this up at all, but I can just smoothly scrape off the thermal paste that's on there. Then I'm going to go ahead and use some little alcohol swabs to clean off the base here of the fan and get all that extra older thermal paste off of there. I want to make sure it's nice and clean. I know I'm going a little above and beyond, but making sure that this thing is ready to conduct cooler temperatures to this processor is pretty crucial. Alright, one thing real quick that I'm going to do before I put in the CPU, and I just read up on this ahead of time, but the way this thing's going to sit in here is this fan is going to rest right on here above where the processor goes. The processor is going to just pop right in there. But one thing I want to do first is, in this case, I'm going to take off these plastic pieces right here, because I will not need these. Now these are on there because there are a lot of CPU fans that connect and latch onto there. This particular fan doesn't work that way, but I am going to keep these parts for the future in case I do end up replacing the fan at some point. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is drop this processor right down into the spot on the motherboard where it will sit to operate. It's surprisingly simple. The first thing you want to do is lift up this little arm that controls the mechanism that will secure the processor. If you take a look, one corner is going to have kind of an identifier so that you know exactly which way the processor will sit in the motherboard. And then you're just going to take it and drop it on, and it'll really just slide into place. It's almost, I mean, it's a perfect fit when you put it on there. You'll know when it just pops into place. Then you just push the arm down. That will now secure the processor in place. And that's it. It is that simple. Now then I'm going to go ahead and take another swab of alcohol and clean this thing really good before we put the fan on it. Now let's get this fan ready. We're going to put a couple of dabs of the thermal paste on here, and then just take a moment to spread it around. Now you'll read some different theories online about the thermal paste and how much or how little to put on there. My goal is just going to be enough to cover the entire thing. One thing that's unique is the copper part here on the fan is round, the processor square. So I just want to make sure that all of the fan is touching and has a nice coat of thermal paste when it goes on the processor itself. So now that we've got the thermal paste all spread on nice and neat all the way around, maybe I'm borderline with a little too much, but I think we're going to be okay with this. And now we're going to just drop the fan right on top of the processor. One thing we need to do though is there's a back plate that comes a little bit loose. So I'm going to put my arm underneath the case and make sure I push the back plate back up so you can see the little spots where the screws will go into will be you know, accessible now. I'm going to drop the fan onto those little screw hole parts that are popping up, and then we're just going to secure you know, each screw down, going in a diagonal fashion opposite each other to get a nice clean tight fit on there. Once you're done with that, make sure you take one more shot all the way around to make sure that everything is screwed down and tight. And then once you've done that, you're basically ready to go. You can almost pick up the entire case by just lifting up the fan. That's how secure it is. One last thing we'll do while we're here is we're going to take the cable for the fan and we're going to plug it into the fan header on the motherboard. It's pretty simple, and when you go to those motherboard diagrams and directions, you'll see which header is what for plugging things in. And now that's plugged in, so now we will have power to the fan and we are all set. Okay, so now we have our CPU installed. We went ahead and popped the fan on right now as well. I did also plug the fan into the motherboard, so that's a done deal. You'll also see later the fan does have one other little cable which enables it to have LED effects. It lights up, so we'll show you that too when we're back into the case here. But next we're gonna go ahead and put in some memory. For this particular build, we wanted to beef up our memory a little bit. Remember, this is something for editing, so two big things that are really going to help us on this computer are this high-powered 8-core 16-thread processor, the Ryzen 7, and we went ahead and purchased 32 gigabytes of Corsair DDR4 RAM. It's 2 sticks of 16. 2 sticks ought to work great for us. The speed of the RAM is 2666 megahertz. Now you can get RAM that's up to 3200 megahertz, and that just means that it works a little bit faster. But for what we're doing, having 32 gigabytes is going to be huge for us. I could have spent a little bit more money, but I chose not to. Again, it's a budget build, and the extra money I don't think would have really shown in any additional performance for what we're trying to put together. So let's go ahead and open up the Corsair Vengeance LPX. Once again, we use the PC parts picker website to make sure this would fit right. We did a little research to make sure it's the right thing. Let's get into the RAM. I'm starting to get a little excited. We're about halfway through with this build already, and right now my main thought is thinking, I hope once everything's plugged in it turns on. I bet you're hoping that too. Now listen, just to touch base more on the RAM, so we did go ahead and go with 32 gigabytes. It was $160, which we thought was a great deal for 32 gigs of this quality Corsair, you know, these memory sticks right here. So we went ahead and pulled the trigger on that. You could downsize a little bit. You could go with 16. I wouldn't go really much less than 16 gigabytes for something like this, but we were able to spend a few extra dollars and not break the bank and still keep within the budget that we set there. So that's why we went with the 32 gigabytes. Alright, so now let's go ahead and take a look here. This particular motherboard has 4 slots that we can put the RAM in. Now the diagram from our motherboard on our little manual piece shows us which ones we want to put it in. We want to put it in slot 1 and 2. And the way this works is this is slot 1, this is 2, this is 3, this is 4. We can expand this memory to go all the way up to 64 gigabytes at some point. I don't think that's going to be necessary. But what we're going to do is we're going to pop open these little slots for us. And you're going to want to follow any information from your motherboard. You're not going to have your RAM next to each other if you have multiple slots. Now, we could have gone ahead and gotten 4 8 gigabyte pieces, but we went with 2 16 gigs. Those worked well, and the price was right. Now, you'll notice there's a little spot right here with the separation, and there's a little separation in the RAM as well. So we want to try to make sure we line that up properly when we go ahead and put it in. So let's drop this one in here first. And when it goes in right, the ends clip back in. So this is in there tight now. Now we'll go ahead and put the other one in. Boom. So now we're tight. So our memory has been installed, all 32 gigabytes. Things are really coming together here, I'll tell you what. Let's see what's next. Alright, so the memory has been installed. Everything's looking good so far. Fingers crossed. Now, the next thing we're going to go ahead and put in is our dedicated graphics card, the GPU. Now, there's basically 2 different types out there. You know, we're running an AMD processor, but for the graphics card, we went with NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1060. It's a very popular graphics card. It comes in a 3 gigabyte or a 6 gigabyte model. We saved a few bucks based on the fact that it's a budget build and went with the 3 gigabyte. In our situation, I don't feel that we're losing a lot by going with the less powered unit. One of the big things that is going to work well for us is we're running Adobe Premiere Pro for our editing software, and some of the features of that are created by NVIDIA, which is also the same company that makes these graphics cards. And one of the main things that it runs well with, as far as the Adobe Premiere Pro, are something called CUDA cores, and that's a feature that the NVIDIA graphics cards have. The AMD graphics cards don't really have the same thing. Again, there's a lot more details you can research on that. I'm not giving you any amazing technical terminology here, just some basic information. For our purpose, this graphics card is going to work great for us. We went with the PNY brand. There's a number of different brands out there you can go with. We went with it because at the time this was $193, the least expensive of the bunch. We could have spent anywhere from another $40 or $50 to $200 for a different GTX 1060, but we went ahead and went with this one. Let's go ahead and unbox it and take a closer look. Now, what's kind of funny about these graphics cards is they all come in different shapes and sizes. This one is actually quite long. So similar to the motherboard, this comes in a static-free bag as well. Now, this is a big card, but it should fit without an issue. Now that is a thing of beauty right there. So that's our GTX 1060 3 gigabyte. It's a single fan unit. At the end, you'll notice there's a couple of outputs right there. Aha! All the way down at the bottom. Finally, we got an instruction manual. Maybe we don't have to go online to find everything out for this. So we shall see. So I'm going to take a little gander at this, make sure we're installing everything right, get our chassis set up, and get this bad boy rolling. Alright, so we are ready to install our big, beautiful GTX 1060 3 gigabyte graphics card. There's one traditional HDMI port, there's one DVI connection, then there are 3 display ports as well. So this can run up to 4 monitors. I don't know if we'll ever get that crazy with it, but it can, so that's pretty cool. So let's go ahead and pop this bad boy into our case. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to go ahead and remove probably 2 of these pieces right here that are in here. As we take a look, this is wide enough for 2 slots, expansion slots right here. So what we want to do is we're going to line up this piece right here to slide into the top PCI slot. You always want to use the one that's closest to the CPU, so we're going to go into that one. First, we just want to get an idea of which one of these covers we're going to take off. We're going to need to take 2 of them off, and it looks like number 2 and number 3 are going to come off. So we're going to go ahead and unscrew these pieces here. Do not lose the screws because you're going to need them in a minute. Now these things are pretty awesome. They'll pop right out of here. Okay. And right in its place will go our card. And we're going to line this up. There's really only one way to pop it in there, so it shouldn't be too difficult. Let me show you that one more time just so you can get a look at it. If I pop that open, I can pull the card out. It's got this little piece at the end there. Okay, I'm going to push that down. Line that up, give it a push. And it looks like we're in there. Alright, so don't forget to put your screws back in here to secure your card. Now, if you recall earlier, I showed you that this particular case has a pretty neat little deal where it has a piece that will hold and support the card if we wanted to use it. Now, I'll tell you what, I don't think I'm going to use it. And the reason is because of the way it would sit right next to the fan. Maybe I'll change my mind at some point, we'll see. But this thing is really solid in there. It's not going anywhere. So I'm going to pass on using that piece and that feature of the case right now. Alright, so now the graphics card has been installed. We're getting down to the nitty gritty. We have our SSD card to install next. There's a lot of different ways that you can go about storing content and stuff on your computer. Traditionally, everybody knows about a hard drive, and the hard drive is what you're probably most familiar with. They're the least expensive method of storage, and you can get hard drives that are anywhere from 500 gigabytes to multiple terabytes worth of storage. But traditionally, they work a little slow, and nowadays, the faster way to go about retrieving things off of your storage is going with what they call an SSD card. The SSD card will work up to 10 times faster, maybe even more than your traditional regular hard drive. It will boot up the computer faster. It will pull things back and forth faster. Now, a lot of people go with a regular hard drive for a lot of storage, and then maybe an extra 250 or 500 gigabytes to put Windows on, their operating system, some of their favorite programs, or whatever the case is, and that way they can gain access to them pretty quick. We went ahead and spent a couple extra bucks, and for $116 we got a 1 terabyte SSD drive made by a company called Crucial. It's got good reviews on Amazon. You know, again, we didn't break the bank on it, stayed within our budget, and I just felt like if we want to use a fast method of storage, why not just go with a little larger SSD, and that way we'll still use some backup external drives to store other things on, but this thing's going to work really good for us. I can load a lot of video and things like that right onto the SSD and work with it very quickly, and it'll certainly help us get projects done a lot faster. So we went with a Crucial 1 terabyte SSD drive. Okay, now so if you have this InWin 101 case, it has got storage for 2 traditional hard drives that you can slide right up here. And these bad boys will pop in real easy, close up, and sit right there, and that's kind of nice. But for our purpose, it actually has a place you can put your SSD drives on that back side, and that's something that I really like a lot. We can take out our SSD drive and fit it right in here into one of these SSD holders. Alright, so here is our crucial SSD drive right here, a 1000 gigabytes, which is 1 terabyte. I mean, the thing is tiny. It weighs like nothing, and it has 2 spots. One you'll plug in for power, one you'll plug in to connect to the computer itself, to the motherboard, to get that storage. And I mentioned about how nice it is. The N-Win has 2 of these things that are, one is elevated, one is more flush, and you'll end up just sitting the hard drive right back here, nice and snug, out of the way. You won't even see it when you're looking at the computer from the other glass side. So let's go ahead and take this thing off and make it happen. We'll go with the flush one first, and then down the road, if we want to expand this storage, it's incredibly easy to just hook on another one right here. Alright, so in this case, we're going to take the SSD, sit it right on top of here. Now the case came with a number of screws and such, and here is one of those situations where you'll use it, or where you use them, I should say. Alright, so now it's screwed on there. Okay, and then I'm just going to take this, pop it right back in here. And you can even just hand tighten it. Boom, and now it's locked on there. So you're in business. Super easy to install that. Now if I wanted to get another one, I could put it right here as well. And again, you could get additional storage drives just for more mass storage and put them right up in the other side of this if you want to go that route too. So SSD installed. Alright, so there's really not much more to attach to the case. I do have a selection of 3 fans, 120 millimeter fans. I got them from a company called Up Here. These are pretty inexpensive. Fans can be pretty cheap. They do light up blue, as that's a favorite color around here at the Sharonatsea household. But you can spend a lot extra money if you want and get flashing wild lights, RGB lights and things like that. But some basic blue ones are cool with us. I'm going to get everything plugged in first. Then I'll go ahead and put the fans on once I get a lot of other things hooked up to the motherboard and such. Let's see if we can get some electronics going and see if we can't plug this thing in and get it fired up. See if it runs for us. Alright, so we're basically down to our last, 2 things left to do. We do have to install the fans, which we'll do in a minute. But first, we're going to start running some wires and get some of these things plugged in. Now, it looks like a whole bunch of spaghetti back here right now. There are a number of wires that are coming from the case itself, and these wires are going to power the audio connections, the 2 USB 3.0 ports up here, and also the LED and power switch for the front of the panel here on the case. Then we're also going to have a number of cables that are going to have to power the motherboard, the CPU, the graphics card, and also the SSD card. So I'm going to figure out which cables go where and then run them through some of the spots here into the front, get them plugged in, and then we'll worry about pulling the cables back a little and starting to clean it up and worry about our cable management so that it looks good and it's clean and organized back here. So I've already run the cables from the front panel of the case up through here, through this slot, and I'll run them down into the system right here. And then as far as the big cables here go, well, we have a number of different ones. Here is a main power cable for the motherboard. So that's a big one. She's going to go all the way through there. This is the PCI plug-in for us. This has multiple plugs you can use, but we're going to use this one to plug into our graphics card. Okay, so we have that going on there. Let's see what else we have. This is 2 CPU powers, so we're going to check those and see if we need to use those. And then here we have some SATA plugs, and we are worried about these 3 things right here. So this is where you just kind of have to play with things and see what you like and see what looks the best. Again, as far as being aesthetically pleasing to the eye and getting your cables run through here. So we're going to mess around with this for a minute, and we'll get back to you because I don't want to waste too much of your time watching me mess around with all this spaghetti. All right, so we've experimented a little bit with some of the wiring and how it'll come through the chassis of the case the best way. And so now I think we're ready to start plugging a few things in, okay? One of the biggest plugs coming out of the power supply is going to be the main motherboard power. And this bad boy here, we're just going to bring it out and plug it in. Let's make sure we're plugging it in the right way. That's always helpful. So there we go there. Now we have our PCI connector here. First, let's go ahead and connect a few things. I know it's a little tricky. There's not a lot of light. Let me see if I can get a little light on the subject here for everyone's sake. Hang in there with me. All right, so if you look down here, there is one spot where we can connect our external USB drives, and that's going to be right here. This thing down here for a second. So that seems to be good to go. Then we have, now I only know where these go because of the research that I did on the hard drive schematic. So I sure am hoping that everything's in the right place. One of these is a power switch. One of these is an LED for when the machine is on for the front. This is going to be for our graphics card. So that's hooked up. This is for the audio connection. As a matter of fact, let's see really quick if I can run it down to here. That feels connected. That seems to be connected. That seems to be connected. This seems to be connected. So far, I feel like everything we have in the front is hooked up and connected now. All right, so quick glimpse so you can see. Let me give you a little more light here. All right, so we've got a lot of things plugged in down here below on the motherboard. We have our audio plugs from the top of the case, the USB ports from the case. We have some lighting pieces and the power switch from the case. All right, we do have an SAT or SATA cord that's plugged in there that's going to plug into the hard drive. Our GPU, graphics card, is plugged in right there. We've got our power plugged into the motherboard right there. So we're moving right along. Now we're going to go take a look at the back of the case and check a few things out and see what we've got going on there. Now I want to go ahead and plug in some power to that same drive. So we're going to see if we can't make that happen. I just need a little bit of light on the subject. Perfect. Thank you so much, light. I appreciate it. So there we've got some power. All right. Now this is the power that operates all this. And that's going to plug in. Oh, I don't know. We could actually plug it into a few different places here. The great thing about all these cables is that they're all very similar and they can be used in conjunction with each other pretty easily. So there we've got that power. And really, these ones are just extras. This is what I'll plug my fans into. You have an option to plug your fan into the motherboard. And when you plug the fan into the motherboard, you have a little more control over it. But for our purpose, I really just need the fans to be going when the system's on and off when the system turns off. I don't need a lot of control. I'm not going to be having some heavy fluctuations in the temperature of the CPU, which is one reason why you want to do that. So in this case, we're going to hook up the fans, and they're just going to plug right into the power box here, the power supply. And when the system's on, the fans are on. When the system's off, the fans are off. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to fire up the fans. Then we're going to go ahead and plug this thing in, and we're going to see what it looks like when we turn it on. Then if that all works, then we can talk about getting Windows put onto here, plug it into a monitor, and seeing if we got ourselves a computer. Alright, so we are here. It is the moment of truth. I kind of double checked all the connections. Everything looks like it is plugged into the right spot. Okay, I have one fan just plugged in here, and I'm going to go ahead and connect the fans up into the system here. But for the moment, I just want to plug it in and make sure it's getting power. And if this thing is set up right, this fan will turn on. This front part should illuminate. And we should see some lights going on the CPU fan, and the graphics card and CPU fan should turn on as well and start running. So that's what we're hoping is going to happen. We got the power plugged in right there, and if you're ready, we will go ahead and give this thing a test in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You hear Sharonatsea? She's over there cheering it on. Alright, let's go. Ready? And boom.
It works.
Oh yes. We've got a little light on the subject. I got some super cool blue lights going on right here. That is awesome. We are illuminating with some blue light over here, which is great. I didn't realize this is going to be blue. I thought it might be red, but maybe it just goes along with whatever lights are happening there. And if the camera person wants to take a swing around here, you will see that this deal here is lit up and running. I gotta check and see how to affect the light. I think I can change the color of that light, I'm not sure. But that fan is on, and you can't see it, but you can tell that the fan here for the GPU is turning as well, so that is on. So right now, everything seems to be rocking and rolling. That is awesome. We hooked up the whole system. It worked. We need to do a little high five action going on. Very nice.
We did it.
Very nice. And so now what we're going to do is I'm going to get the fans hooked onto here, and then the next thing is going to be getting Windows put on here and firing up and plugging into a monitor. So we're going to keep you posted. We're going to take you the whole way through until we hopefully get this thing turned on, and we can start getting some videos edited, okay? So check back soon. And our final install is going to be our 3 fans. They're super easy to connect, just 4 screws, hook them onto the case, and then we're going to run the wires and plug them into the power supply like I had mentioned. And with them all connected now, we turn it on, fire it up, and we see that they are rolling. So we're looking good. We've got airflow. Alright, so we got our budget video editing computer build done. Computer's put together, we fired her up, everything turned on, lights are on, fans are coming on. That was awesome. But now we need to make sure that the SSD drive is connected right, and that everything is going to be powering properly as we plug into the monitors. We connected through the HDMI cable that goes right into the graphics card. And the first thing I want to do is make sure that it's recognizing the motherboard. Then we're going to talk about putting Windows onto the computer if you have not already purchased a version of Windows to load up. Alright, so if everything's working fine, we should be able to turn on this computer, and the first thing we'll see should be a flash from the motherboard. So let's take a look at that. Alright, so she's firing up here for us. I'm going to hit delete when that motherboard screen came up, and now I'm going to access the BIOS on the motherboard. So looks like everything's connected. We're looking good right here. And right here we got into the Gigabyte motherboard BIOS. Now there's a few things that you can do on this particular screen, but your motherboard will have its own, you know, kind of different looking deal. Gigabyte's pretty standard. This is kind of how the BIOS look. Different brands will have a different look and layout. If I scroll over here, I can see it's recognizing my CPU. All right, it's recognizing the memory. Now currently the memory is showing that it's you know, running at 2680 megahertz. If you recall, 2666 was the megahertz for each one of our memory sticks. So it's running at 2680. If yours is not optimized at the full speed right now, there are things that you can do to make adjustments to that. You can research that. Every motherboard might be a little differently. The Gigabyte has a thing called XMP, which has to do with getting your memory to max out and run at full capacity. So we got that going on. It does show the temperature as well. You know, the fan's on, the temperature of the CPU is 31 degrees Celsius, which is great. Being in the low 30s is right where we want to be while the computer is basically idling. So if I go into the BIOS, it'll show me a couple of boot options and where the computer is going to boot up from, and that's important, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But right now we're feeling good that we plugged it in, we turned it on, and we're able to access the BIOS from the motherboard. So that means things are up and running and working properly, and that we're being recognized. Now right now we have an SSD storage drive in there, and that thing's basically clean. It's got nothing on it. There's no operating system, and in this case we're going to want to put Windows on there. Now you can go out and spend $80 to $100 on a version of Windows and load it up, but there is one other thing that you can do if you want to put Windows onto your computer that might work for you. And I'll show you what I did. Now if you have a Windows-based computer, you may recall not too long ago all the Windows computers were prompting and upgrading and wanting to upgrade to Windows 10, the newest version of the Windows operating system. Now you can see here that we're online, so we're good to go, but I'm going to show you what to do to get that Windows operating system onto your brand new computer. Alright, now you're going to want to have another computer that has internet access. And you're going to want to have a little thumb drive here. You got to have at least like 8 gigabytes of space. It's going to be anywhere from, I don't know, 8 to 15 bucks at the store. And what you want to do is you want to go to the Microsoft.com web page. Okay, and you're going to go into the download section where the download Windows 10 section is. Alright, now, if you scroll down a little here, there is a Create Windows 10 Installation Media section. And what we do there is there's a download tool that you can click on. Just take a second to download here. Alright. Now it's going to give you a Windows 10 setup screen and a Windows Media Creation tool, I think is what they're going to call this thing. So basically what this is going to do is this is going to allow us to download Windows onto our thumb drive. And as long as you're currently running on a good, legal, activated Windows from whatever computer you're going to do this on, you can do this pretty easily. Okay, so you would just click through the options here, follow the prompts, and the last thing it'll tell you to do would be to insert your thumb drive and download the installation tool. Now we've done that already, so I'm going to go ahead and click out of that. But it's pretty easy to follow, and more directions you can just search online, and you might find some YouTube videos that are specific about that out there that you can take a look at. Now earlier when we were in the BIOS, I talked about the boot option. Well, what you're going to do is you're going to take this thumb drive that you created from another computer, and you're going to pop this bad boy into one of the USB drives on your brand new computer. So that when you fire it up, it's going to recognize this, or it should recognize this, and boot up and start prompting to download and install Windows. Now once you get through the process of getting Windows onto the computer, it'll act as if it's just a brand new computer firing up for the first time. Now at one point it will prompt you to put in a product key. Now what I was able to do is I was able to go back to an older laptop that we had in the house that we're not using anymore. It's not active anymore, so Windows isn't active on it. And I took the product key from that was not currently active, and I loaded that in. So it recognized that product key and allowed me to do what it considered an upgrade to Windows 10 using that product key. So now the version of Windows I have in this computer here is using that product key, and again that allowed me to upgrade to a version of Windows 10. So it put Windows 10 on the computer. I went through the process of signing in and getting everything set up as if it was the first time ever, and now I have Windows 10 just like any other computer on this computer. So it worked out fantastic for us. Now the next thing you want to do is probably go in there and update all your drivers. For instance, the driver for the video card had to be updated to operate properly. We had to mess around a little bit to make sure we got the right settings on our screen. Every TV or monitor is a little bit different. Then I had to go into the TV settings themselves and adjust it to get the best possible picture. So you can mess around with it through your computer display controls as well as into your TV display controls to make sure that you can get a good, clean, quality picture. Now another thing that we set up was our internet connection. Now I don't have a modem in this room, so we usually run through Wi-Fi. And although this motherboard does not have built-in Wi-Fi, I simply grabbed one of these that I had laying around. This one's a Hero dual band wireless USB adapter, and I just plug it into a USB port, set it up, and it accesses the Wi-Fi in the house, and it works really well. It'll work on a 5 gigahertz connection. So I was able to put that in, use that, and that's how we're connecting to the internet right now. Now once you do that, then you can go to one of your favorite websites, like for instance Sharonatsea, and I don't know, you can click on a video,
with no taxes or fees,
and you're online, baby. And now it's kind of that simple, and now we're watching Sharonatsea online on YouTube, and now you're running your new budget-oriented video editing computer build. So that'll pretty much wrap up the video here for us, and we hope you enjoyed following along as I put together this computer. My first time ever building a computer, and it went very, very smooth. We didn't have any issues, followed all the directions, I did my research ahead of time. So I want to mention one more time the website that I used to make sure that all the parts that I was buying were compatible, pcpartpicker.com. You can go on there and go in and just start entering what CPU cooler, motherboard, memory, storage, and all that kind of stuff that you want to make sure that it goes together well. So again, pcpartpicker.com was super helpful in making sure that everything I got would work well together. Now if you're just here for the computer build, hopefully you got a little something out of it. It might help you with your next build if you're a new computer builder. And if you stumbled over here because you follow Sharon at Sea, or you're always looking for travel and cruise vlogs and cruise news, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell so you always know when there's new content coming out. Monday nights we do our live show. That's always a lot of fun. Stop on by and check that out. And for everyone here at Sharon at Sea, myself, Sharon, and Matthew, we just want to say thanks a lot and happy cruising.